Kamala Harris gave an interview over the weekend to Chuck Todd for Meet the Press. And there's a few interesting moments I want to look at from it. But I think especially the first clip I'm going to show you just reveals how a lot of the political expertise that I kind of thought Kamala Harris had earlier in her career, and even maybe the beginning of her presidential run, is just gone now. And she's just really not great in these types of settings. And it's disappointing because you would think whenever Biden a lot of times has that similar struggle of communicating, that Kamala Harris would be able to fill in as kind of someone who can speak on behalf of the administration. But we've seen clearly that's not the case. So the first moment I'm going to show you is her answering for the Democratic Party's actions in supporting extremist candidates in some of these races for the Republican Party nomination. So what the Democratic Party has done is gone, look, this candidate running in the GOP primary, so trying to get the Republican nomination, is really extreme and maybe wouldn't do good in a general election. So we're going to support them so that whenever they run against the Democrat, if they end up getting the nomination, then we'll lose to the Democrat. As we've discussed, though, what you're doing is helping a more extreme candidate. And if they end up winning, you're in a really bad spot because now that more extreme candidate is in power. But then you think, well, what if it sets up a situation where the Democratic Party sweeps all of those elections? Then was it worth it? But I do think from kind of a principled moral standpoint, it's a little icky. So she's asked about that and just does not answer it effectively, I didn't think at all.
I'm curious, when you see the Democratic Party and some parts of the party funding ads to promote some of these election deniers in primaries, whether it's Michigan, the high-profile race there, Illinois, Colorado, New Hampshire, it looks like a little bit cynical. And the president went out of his way to say there are good Republicans here. Should you leave the good Republicans alone in a primary? Is the Democratic Party making a mistake here by those people could win if you're not careful?
I mean, listen, I'm not going to tell people how to run their campaigns. I ran in terms of statewide office.
Would you have done this? Would you have done this? Is this something you'd be comfortable with?
I'm not going to tell people how to run their campaigns, Chuck. I ran for a statewide for Attorney General, re-election, won both times, for Senate, won that race. And I know that it is best to let a candidate, along with their advisors, let them make the decision based on what they believe is in the best interest of their state. I'm not going to tell people what to do.
You're not worried that this reflects poorly on the Democrats?
I think that what we have to focus on is that in 60 days as of this interview, in less than 2 months, we are looking at a midterm election.
So, especially when you are in a moment where your president is very effectively and honestly, and I think in a great show of leadership, calling out the danger that the part of the Republican Party that is MAGA, that is quite large, represents to our democracy, you should tread lightly in supporting candidates who are election deniers, right? If you're going out of your way to call out election deniers and then over there supporting them in primaries so that you can run against them and hopefully win, that does seem hypocritical and takes a little bit of the air out of your sails, because how it could be posed is clearly you don't think it's that big of a threat if you're okay rolling the dice on them possibly getting in Congress just because you think it would make your election easier. So I like that question by Chuck Todd, and I think I'm just really sensitive to the annoying politician answer on stuff, even though she's doing what we see tons of politicians do, which is just not really address the question and say, I'm going to stay out of it. Yeah, but he asked from your perspective, would you do that? In a hypothetical situation, would you be okay doing that? And I wish some of those people would say, listen, that's their race, so they're going to do what they're going to do, or that's the Democratic Party fundraising apparatus's decision. I would never support that. Something like that, I think, would be more honest. But here's another moment where Kamala Harris is speaking to the illegitimacy of the Supreme Court and how people have lost trust in it.
We have some polling that shows confidence in the Supreme Court is at its lowest level that we've measured in over 20 years. How much confidence do you have in the Supreme Court?
I think this is an activist court.
What does that mean?
It means that we had an established right for almost half a century, which is the right of women to make decisions about their own body as an extension of what we have decided to be the privacy rights to which all people are entitled. And this court took that constitutional right away. And we are suffering as a nation because of it. That causes me great concern about the integrity of the court overall, especially as someone who my life was inspired by people like Thurgood Marshall.
Okay. I think she handled that one better. Obviously, I agree with the statement of they went against that important precedent, took away rights, and that's obviously going to cause people to trust that institution less. But a little bit different than some people, a lot of people on the left, I would say, is where I stand on this. While I recognize and totally agree with that, at some point, there is, even though it's not at all a democratic institution, there is a heavy democratic influence on the Supreme Court, because who chooses who's going to be on the Supreme Court? The president and then the Senate as well. You know, the Senate confirms them. And so I think pretending like they're going to be completely separate from politics is silly. And we've just seen clearly the Republican Party prioritize the Supreme Court and prioritize the levers of power within it and getting people in there who agree with their positions more effectively. The Republican Party has done that more effectively, unfortunately, for the country. And so I think it's not so much the institution that is, whatever you want to call it, illegitimate, doesn't have integrity. It's not so much that the Supreme Court as an institution, the way that it's designed, doesn't, because that's what you kind of mean when you say an institution, right? It's obviously the people within it don't agree with broader American positions, or the positions of America broadly. And so as much as we want to pretend that a Supreme Court justice is just able to look at the law and blah, 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 it's not true. Everyone has their own biases, their own beliefs, and their own ambitions for the country. And while people who are very well versed in the law should be able to separate some from that when analyzing the Constitution and different cases, no one can do it completely. And the Constitution is vague enough where you're going to have to make some determinations. Absolutely. And I think us recognizing as a country that's the case, and then moving forward and understanding it's important we get representatives into positions of power who can affect who's on the Supreme Court, and get people in there who are more in line with our values, is what we should be doing, instead of pretending like the entire institution is completely broken and should be tossed out, right? Instead, we need to work harder to make sure they don't get the type of people they got on the Supreme Court. I mean, that's why the 2016 election of Trump was so important, because Trump ended up putting 3 people on the Supreme Court. And that's pretty much, that is why Roe v. Wade was overturned. And I think for a long time, the Democratic Party has not concerned themselves with the Supreme Court as much as they should have, including kind of the voters' mindset on it. Okay, and then the final moment I want to show you from this interview is she was asked, would indicting Trump be too divisive? Would it divide the country? And here's her answer.
All right.
In that regard.
But let me try to go to 60,000 feet. What do you say to the argument that it would be too divisive for the country to prosecute a former president?
I think that our country is a country that has gone through different periods of time where the unthinkable has happened, and where there has been a call for justice, and justice has been served. And I think that's potentially going to always be the case in our country, that people are going to demand justice, and they rightly do.
So I don't know so much about that answer. Just say that if he committed crimes, he should be held accountable. No one's above the law, that type of language, because the demanding of justice from people is less important unless there was something to hold someone accountable for, right? Like if broadly America wants Trump to be prosecuted, that shouldn't really mean too much. It should only matter what he has done, what can be proven that he's done, and then he should be held accountable, which obviously I think he should. And even though it's a bummer that this will be a divisive event, it absolutely needs to happen.